Rachel, thank you so much for being part of the summit. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dallas. It's so wonderful to talk with you again. I love it every time we talk.
I know. Well, let me just read your bio for people who are just meeting you for the first time, and then we're going to dig into this topic of overcoming imposter syndrome, which I'm really excited to hear your juicy nuggets about that. So, for
Awesome.
everyone who hasn't met you, Rachel Huffmire is an award-winning author who writes futuristic fairy tale retellings with twisty plots and happily ever afters. And I'll just give a little plug. I love Rachel's books. She's an amazing writer, so I
Thank
definitely
you.
recommend checking them out. Rachel lives with her husband, three children, and a library of books that is slowly overtaking their house. It's not her fault, honest. When she's not writing, Rachel enjoys baking apple pastries, taking long naps, and wearing warm cardigans. I
Mhm.
am so happy to have you here and to talk about imposter syndrome, which I know is a topic of a keynote that you're delivering
Yes,
at a conference coming up soon. But I just think this is a topic that like all writers struggle with at some point or another. And I also feel like we tend to feel so alone in it. So I think it's just
Mhm.
really important to dig into this and maybe if you want to even just kind of define for our listeners, if anyone is sort of like, what does imposter syndrome mean? Do you want to just kind of tell us about what it is and then maybe like what is going on in our minds when we get this imposter syndrome that's striking?
Absolutely. Well, I'm really grateful that lately there's been a lot more chatter about imposter syndrome so that hopefully people aren't feeling as alone. But when I was doing my research on like how to overcome imposter syndrome or how to like fight back instead of just like, okay, I guess this is part of my life now. All of the articles were like, oh, just tell your friends that you have it and then you won't feel alone. And I was like, well, is there no strategy for becoming stronger than imposter syndrome? And I was really having a hard time finding this. So that's why I created this keynote, is because I think that we should be stronger than imposter syndrome. We should be able to have that confidence that we need so that it's not holding us back. So basically, imposter syndrome is like that little voice in the back of your head that sounds a lot like you, that's just kind of second guessing everything you do. It's saying you're not capable, you're not qualified, or you're not good enough. It's basically your inner editor, if you're a creative, that's stopping your creativity every step of the way. You know, you take two steps forward and then it takes you one step back. Um, One of the big key phrases about it is that you feel like a fraud if you
Mhm.
are successful. So it even stops you from having that ability to celebrate the things you do right. And so that's why I think it's so dangerous, is because it's killing your creativity. Especially as writers, we're constantly being critiqued or asking for critique, and we don't need that from inside us, right? We need to be confident and having that green light inside, even if we're receiving like negative reviews or critiques that are helping us to become better. We need to be able to be confident in ourselves. So that's imposter
Yes.
syndrome in a little nutshell, and why it's dangerous for creatives.
Yes, I love that definition. And I feel like too, when you were talking about how even in our successes, sometimes we have imposter syndrome. And I know for myself, I almost felt like I would get to a point in my writing and my career where it's almost like I didn't have to deal with imposter syndrome anymore. But the crazy
Yeah,
thing about it is I feel like it kind of levels up when we do. Um,
totally.
yeah, isn't that amazing? It's like really insane.
Yeah. When I first started querying novels, I had a list of like my 10 favorite agents that I really wanted to be represented by. And I got 72 rejection letters, and I never even queried that batch of 10 because it was imposter syndrome at work. I was afraid of being rejected, which was silly because I was basically making the decision for them by
Mm.
never querying them. It was my inner imposter was stopping me from even trying. And I eventually got that published, but I didn't even go for that big goal that I really wanted to. And that's what I'm afraid most people are struggling with imposter syndrome, is stopping them from achieving a potential just because they don't think they deserve it, or they don't think they're good enough to even try.
Yeah. And like you said, you really hit the nail on the head where it's like sometimes we're so afraid of rejection that we end up like pre-rejecting ourselves because we don't even go
Right.
for the opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and
Yep.
that's too why I feel like it's so important to address imposter syndrome, as you're saying, and not just kind of accept it as like, okay, this is a way of life. I'm going to just live this way. But because it is something that I don't think we ever fully like get over, I think it's building up those tools that when it does pop up, we can say, okay, here's what is happening, and here are my tools that I can use to kind of address this at each level of success that we get to. Because it almost seems like a new level of imposter syndrome kind of comes up with each level of success. So what do you think about establishing like this strong inner identity to kind of deal with imposter syndrome? Do you have any favorite like skills or tips or advice with that, so people can start kind of just building up that inner resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love studying neuroscience. I think it's fascinating. And that was one of the things I dove really deep into, because we have, uh, well, imposter syndrome was a theory started by Dr. Pauline Rose Clance in 1978. So she's a psychologist, she's a doctor. And so I feel like we needed to know the neuroscience behind it too. And so when I started researching, I was learning about neuroplasticity and neural pathways, and how our brains are kind of like these highways, right? And so if we're constantly traveling down a certain train of thought, those are going to become really strong highways that basically your thoughts are going to get sucked down without even choosing, right? Our brain's constantly trying to make things habitual so that we're burning less calories. It's a survival instinct. But if we're constantly faced with negative input, which, let's face it, negative input is so much easier to come across than positive input, those are going to become those really strong neural pathways in our minds. And so I think one of the biggest tactics that I use is giving positivity equal opportunity, because we need to make sure that those neural pathways are just as strong as our natural negative pathways that are going to develop. And so anytime you recognize, oh, I'm having this train of thought, I need to stop. And I also need to give positive equal opportunity. I need to, even if I don't believe it right now, because this pathway is so strong that I can't accept the logic of positivity, I still need to say it. I still need to give it a chance to develop. So that's one of my favorite tools, is using 10 minutes of your day. That's like 1% of your day. If you're awake for 16 hours, 10% of your, or 1% of your day, to either listen to something really positive, a podcast, YouTube is great, something that's going to give you motivation and be this outer voice that's telling you that you can. Because if your inner voice is telling you that you can't, you might need that other voice, somebody else, to be telling you the opposite.
I love that. And I feel like there's so many great tips embedded in that one. Like, I feel like it seems almost like the first step is just recognizing when those negative voices come up, like almost just recognizing that imposter syndrome is happening. And like you're saying, kind of putting up that stop sign and then trying to actively have some positivity in your life too. And I love how you're suggesting that. I do think sometimes those outer voices are easier for us to believe or to listen to, and that's a great kind of gateway into then our inner voice kind of believing those things too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I love what you wrote when we were talking about having you be part of the summit, and you were talking about like ways to become one of the most confident writers, in the industry, which I feel like is kind of the next level, right? So we think about trying to replace some of those negative voices with more positive voices, which just naturally will like build our confidence. And this really struck me too, because I do feel like sometimes there's this belief that like as writers, we're supposed to be down on ourselves. We're not supposed to be very confident. We're supposed to have self-doubt about our work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You can still be open to getting feedback and making your work better while also like being confident and knowing that your voice deserves to be told. So do you have any ways that you use or that you like suggest that people try to work on building their confidence?
Yeah. I mean, when you're saying that, I'm thinking of the whole tortured writer trope, right? That's like, it's a thing for a reason, and we need to get rid of that. We don't deserve that. We deserve the beauty of creativity. But one of the things that I think really helped me decide to become a confident writer is restructuring what confidence means. A lot of times we perceive it as There are people who have an ego, they're overconfident, right? Or they're underconfident. But I think what confidence truly is, I heard this quote. Oh, I can't remember who said it. I've got to find so I can attribute it to her. But Susie Moore, she's a life coach that I
Oh,
listen
I
to.
love Susie. I
She's
listen to her
great.
too.
Yay! That makes me happy. She said, confidence isn't about getting it right, right? Because we figure if we're confident, then we're not going to fail. Confidence isn't about getting it right. It's about being willing to accept the negative emotions that come with inevitable failure. We are going to fail. That's part of being human. That's part of growing. Are we allowing ourselves to feel disappointed or sad or rejected? And if we can handle feeling those emotions, then we can do anything, right? And so if you can allow yourself to feel anything, you can be the most confident person out there. And I thought, holy cow, that changes everything, because I'm not always going to get things right. I'm not always going to succeed. I am going to get bad book reviews. I am going to get people who just don't love what I do. That's fine. If I can deal with, oh, bummer, then I can still be super, super confident and take all those steps. I can get rejection letters. I think that's totally what we have to be willing to do in this industry to make it, one, but also just to not be a tortured writer, not torture ourselves with not being willing to accept those emotions. So anyway, that was a really great thing for me that helped me restructure. Oh, I am confident, and it doesn't mean I have to have an ego, because I was definitely afraid of that.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't mean I have to like talk down about myself either. I can just sit with whatever is coming and feel it, and then move forward, and I'll be okay.
I
So,
love that
anyway.
reframe. There's so much grace in that and so much freedom. And I feel like it really takes away that impulse of perfectionism, or like we have to, like you're saying, somehow not make any mistakes, and then we can somehow earn our confidence as writers. And I also love how empowering it is, because you're really taking away those external things that are inevitably going to happen. Like you're saying, the bad reviews or the rejections or all of that stuff. And it's sort of like you're instead focusing on yourself, and okay, I can deal with the disappointment or the negative emotions that come up, and I'm still going to continue onward anyway. So I just love that reframe. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, and I felt like that was really important, because I'm an author coach. And so sometimes some of the clients I would work with would get a negative review, and they would say, how do I get rid of this review? Like, how do I change their mind? How do I confront them about this? And they needed to change the external so they didn't feel the emotion anymore, right? That was too hard for them to feel. And so I think as soon as you change that frame, then you don't feel like you have to control things that are out of your control, because you're allowing yourself to feel those things. So anyway, I just think it's a much easier way to live as well.
Yeah, it's so good and so important. And I always talk with my clients about the similar things. Like no matter what book you write, there's always going to be someone who doesn't get it or doesn't like it or leaves a negative review. So I just love that idea of kind of dealing with the emotion and focusing on those people who do love your books. Because tying back to what we were talking about with negativity and positivity, we could get 50 great reviews of our book, and what's the one we're going to focus on and remember? It's like the one negative one. So tying back into what you said, like focusing on the positive ones that we get.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's been so great to talk with you, Rachel. And I just love this kind of like crash course in neuroscience. And it's so many great tips for just dealing with the imposter syndrome that comes up. And I want to make sure you have a very generous free gift for our viewers. So do you want to go into your ebook and then also your conference that's coming up that you have a generous discount for our summit attendees?
Absolutely. All right. So I have Healthy Writing Habits that I co-wrote with a dear friend of mine, Beth Buck. She's an editor. I'm a writer. It all like worked out perfectly. And so it's a way it's kind of a workbook with exercises to help you decide what your best writing habits are, because we can easily hear about the people who write 10,000 words a week and be like, I'm not capable of that. And that's okay. We want to find out what is healthy for you. So all of these exercises are going to kind of work through how fast do you write, how do you outline best, all these different things. So if you want to just kind of explore who you are as a writer and how you like to produce and how fast you want to produce, it's a good starting point for helping you decide what your word counts are for the week in a healthy way without comparing yourself to anybody else. So it's an ebook with that. And then also we have the Author Capital Conference that we're giving a $20 off the conference. It's actually live right now. The way we did it was too many people are trying to squeeze writing conferences into their schedule. Of, okay, it's on this weekend, I got to just show up. And that doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for me all the time. You know, we're either working a 9 to 5 or we're moms. So this one is a live conference that's just open for a full year, and you can come kind of masterclass style, watch whenever, you know, so we call it the conference that fits in your pocket because it's just always there for you. So anyway, that's $20 off, and then plus the ebook.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's so generous. And I will include the links for that below with this. And then before I let you go, can you share with viewers just the best way to get in touch with you if they want more of you, if they want to hire you or read your books or all of that good stuff? How can they find you?
Of course. So I have my website, rachelhuffmire.com. I am really active on Instagram. So if you send me a private message that way, you can also email me at contact@rachelhuffmire.com. And then of course, there's the Author Capital Conference, which there's a chat feature down there. You can just go to authorcapitalconference.com and then click the chat down on the bottom right corner, and then I'll always answer there as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It was so great talking with you.
Dallas.
And yeah, I'm just so excited to read your next book, and I'm really excited about the conference. So thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Absolutely. I'm excited about the summit. So thank you.